Hello, hello. Welcome back, folks. This is Psychadjacent. I'm your host, Dr. Thomas Hughes. I am very, very happy to be back for another week. With me here today is Mr. Chris Browning. Say hello to the audience, Chris.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming. Are you ready to get started?
Oh, I am. Let's do this.
All right, fantastic. Let's get to it. All right, we're back. Okay, so just so the audience is filled in and clued into what's going on, the inspiration for today's podcast is for a few reasons. As time goes on, I am learning that there's a lot of stuff for me to learn about money and finances. If you didn't study business or finance in school, or depending upon what neighborhood you grew up in, chances are there are a lot of people out there that don't know much about money. And also, Chris, I'm not sure if you've heard of this COVID thing that's going on, but it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I've heard a few people talking about it.
Yeah. And the need to make yourself financially secure has never been more present because of COVID. People have lost their jobs. A lot of people can't afford their rent. So I think it's more important than ever that people find themselves to be as financially secure as possible. So that's why I invited you on. So, Chris, you are a financial analyst. Okay, I know that about you. I have no idea what that means to be a financial analyst. And I know that you host a podcast called Popcorn Finance. And that's how I first found out about you. And just to give you a plug early on, you can find that podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. But that's how I found you. So what I'd like to hear from you, and what I think the audience would like to hear, is just tell us about yourself. How did you get involved in finance?
Yeah, well, financial analyst is, I think, a made up term. Like, it can mean, I shouldn't say made up. It can just mean a lot of things.
Okay,
like,
all right.
You can be a financial analyst and do so many different things that almost loses meaning. For me, what it means is I handle like budgeting for a large organization out here in Southern California.
Okay.
So I help them prepare their annual budget, do that type of stuff. But I met analysts who do stuff that's not even close to that. So that's what I do under that umbrella. But I thank you for the plug as well. But yeah, I host a podcast called Popcorn Finance, a short form show where I discuss finance and about the time it takes to make popcorn. That's the whole tagline for the show there. And my introduction into the finance world, it was through college. That's how I got involved in all this, and actually went to college as an art major. I didn't even go in to do finance at all.
I love when people start off doing one thing and switch to something else. I absolutely love it. Please tell us about that some more. How did you go from art to finance?
When I was graduating high school, like, I wasn't a great student in high school. I was kind of bored. It wasn't really drawing me in. I wanted to do anything but be there and do homework and all that other stuff. So I barely made it into college, and my parents were very scared for me. They were like, what are you doing? We know you can do this. Why aren't you doing your work? I was like, I just, I didn't have a good excuse. I could have done it. I just didn't. It was not interesting. It wasn't grabbing me.
Right.
So I happened to join this program called the Art Academy when I was in high school. I was really into drawing at the time. I loved Pixar and animation. That's what I thought I wanted to do. I was only in the program for about a year because I wanted to play sports, and I couldn't do both at the same time. So I chose the thing that I had no possibility in the world of making a career out of, sports, instead of sticking with the art side. And so when it came time to fill out my college applications, they asked you what your major is going to be. And I spent a lot of time in our, we had like a college center, like a resource center at our school. And I would talk to the counselor there, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I was trying to, like, someone help me figure out what I want to do with my life. And, they don't know. They're like, we'll try this, take this test. It'll tell you what you're good at. And I was like, this didn't help me.
Right.
So the only thing I had left to fall back on was art. I was like, I was in the art program. I really, enjoy creating things. I'm a big fan of animation. Maybe this could be it for me. So I put that down. And funny thing was, out here, there's the closest college to me at the time was Cal State Long Beach. And they were known for having a pretty good, like, film program and art program. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll go there. And then I had a couple others backups. I filled out my application wrong. And so they rejected me because I forgot something. But Cal State Fullerton, which was like one of my backup schools, they sent me a letter, said, hey, we noticed you're missing something. Could you send us the backup? And I was like, oh, yeah. So I sent them the data. They're like, oh, yeah, you qualify. And they let me in.
Okay.
So I ended up going to Cal State Fullerton. I was in the art program first semester. I'm all excited. I buy my supplies. I get to the art class, and it's like this 2-dimensional drawing class. And they have me do all these like different art projects. And I was like, I don't like this at all. Like, I don't know what's going on, but everyone else here seems to be way more into this than I am. So that made me start to think like, maybe I don't want to do this, but I don't know what else I would do. So my second semester, go for my next art class. And I think the thing that the last straw was we had to do this project. We had to make these sculptures out of toothpicks. And you had to make 40 of these sculptures. And every sculpture had to have 9 sticks. And every stick was made of 2 toothpicks taped together. And I was like, why? I was like, you know what? This is not for me. I do not enjoy this. I mean, I probably needed these classes. I'm sure they were building a foundation to help me later on. But in my mind, I was like, this is boring. I don't like this. What else is out there? And just by chance, I was taking a finance class as one of my general education courses. It just fit one of those slots I needed. I said, this checks something off my list I got to do to graduate. And it was fascinating. I was like, this is really interesting. They were talking about like investing and just all these topics and terms I'd never heard of before. And I was like, this is pretty practical stuff. My mom was an accountant. So I was like, it's in that business world. She'll be happy if I make this change, because they were all questioning my decision to be an art major. Got it. I changed my major that semester. And from that point on, I jumped into the world of finance.
Awesome. What is it with young people and wanting to be professional athletes? It's wrong.
I have no idea.
I did too when I was young. When I was like 15 or 16, I thought about it and I quickly realized I don't think this is going to work out. No. I always tell this story. I have to tell you this story. You remember Percy Harvin? You know who that is?
I don't think I know who that is.
Percy Harvin used to play for the Minnesota Vikings and I think the Seattle Seahawks too. But he was this awesome athlete, and he's from Virginia. And I did track when I was in Virginia, and seeing Percy, I only saw him like one time at a track meet, and just seeing him run just made me realize that there are different levels. And I'm just not there.
That reality hits you, man.
It does hit you. So when you were, that's very interesting. So you were in the art class and you were actually doing the assignments, and doing it showed you like it, but you don't love it. This is not something you want to do for the rest of your life, potentially.
Yeah, it was that. And I think it was seeing when you see other people super passionate about something around you. Yeah. And you realize that I don't feel the same way. And in my mind, I was like, well, that means this is not for me. Like, look at their joy and their like enthusiasm into these projects. And every time I see one, I'm like, this is horrible. Like, how long is this going to take me? That probably shouldn't be my reaction.
Yeah, I can imagine you sitting in that classroom with the toothpicks, just looking around, just like this is ridiculous. No.
It's like I don't even think I built one. I think at that point I immediately went and changed. Went to the office and said, "How do I change my major?"
All right. Well, right now you're a financial analyst, and you also host a podcast. How did you get into podcast hosting?
It was like an idea I had for a while. So when I graduated college, I graduated like right in the middle of the recession. And so when I got out, I had, during that time I was in school, I ended up selecting a concentration in financial planning. Okay. It was just by chance. The school I happened to get into, they had a great business program, and they had this very specific program under finance where you could basically learn the foundation of being a financial planner. And so when I got out, I was like, that's what I would love to do. I want to help people learn about this stuff and get better about their money. But there was the job market was horrible at the time. It was, I think almost every industry was hurting during that period of time. And so all of the jobs I was being offering were like sales jobs and things that felt sketchy, and I didn't feel comfortable doing them. So I ended up just kind of falling into the world of accounting because that's what my mom did. She was like, you need to look at some of these other agencies out here. Everyone's looking for an accountant. So I ended up getting bookkeeping work, and I managed a payroll department, and I did all these jobs that I really didn't enjoy at all. And so I found myself, though, in all these positions, being the person who would help with the retirement questions people had. And they're like, oh, I need to set up my 401k plan. What does this mean? What does that mean? And I would sit there and I would like walk people through, oh, this is what this means. And this is why you would pick this. And here's the fees and all that stuff. And I was like, man, it would be great to teach these things, but I don't know how I would do it. I'm already so deep into this career path now. It feels hard to just quit and just switch and do something completely different.
Right.
I live out here in Southern California and I'm always driving. So I got into podcasts while I was in college because I had to commute back and forth. And in college, my friend hosted a video game podcast. I helped him edit it. And then eventually I got on it with him. And, it was fun. Nobody was listening to it. I don't even know if anyone ever listened to it. But I was like, I think I could do like a podcast. I think that would be a way of me like kind of scratching that itch of teaching personal finance. So I came up with the idea one day at work, like over, several weeks. I came up with the name and the concept, and then I just sat on it and I did nothing for 3 years. I just held on to it and was just too nervous to get started.
Right. And
then one day this app called Anchor came out. I gave it a try, and I literally recorded my first episode in my car. And that's how the show got started.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. There's something about when you first start your show and knowing that there's not that many people listening.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Though. There's also something on top of there where you know that even the very few people are listening, they're supportive and they're there. And that's why you keep the show going for the people for the small people. I would rather have 50 people than 50,000 that aren't listening.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. So really quickly, before we get into the nuts and bolts of things, I am curious about where you grew up and your parents. You said that your mom was an accountant. Did she talk to you about finances when you were growing up?
No.
Really?
No, we never had this money conversations at home, really, at all.
Really?
You think we would, but no, we never did.
Why is it that? Because I didn't have many conversations with my mom either. I mean, about money, about she was working most of the time. I remember when I was 10 years old, I remember asking her about the birds and the bees, and she told me to wait until I was older. Well, I'm 32 years old now, and we still haven't had that conversation. So not much talking in my house either. Why do you think, and we'll just focus on finances.
Yeah. Why
do you think that some parents or maybe even some families don't discuss money more?
I think that there's a few reasons. I think sometimes the issue is if they're not doing well with money.
Okay.
I don't think there's any reason why they be enthusiastic and then turn around and talk to their kids about that.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of us are just winging it as it is. Like you're just doing the best you can. You're going to work, you're paying your bills, and then you might be saving something. So it's not, you may not have a lot of knowledge that you feel that you have. You do. There's things that obviously like someone younger has no idea what's going on.
Right.
But I think it's like, one, you don't feel like you know enough to teach someone about it. You're maybe struggling and you don't want to talk about your money situation. And then I think the thing too was like for us, I think it was all these things together, plus the fact that it was kind of like you're like my parents saw me as a kid. I'm the kid. What they're doing with their money is not my concern.
Oh, yeah.
I do the kid stuff. I worry about that. And they'll take care of this stuff. I think sometimes I probably crossed the line with the questions I was asking, and you get you don't worry about this. That's kind of the response I would get sometimes.
And just looking back on that situation now, do you think there's room for our generation to make changes to that?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's kind of one of those things like you take what your parents gave you and then you build on that.
Right.
My parents, they did the best they could. One thing I heard someone say recently, it's like these older generations. So like I guess it'd be like the baby boomer generation. That's where my parents would fall. 'Cause I'm just a couple years older than you. Their experience with working and saving for retirement is more than likely much different than ours, because something like the 401k is a relatively new thing. It really got started in the 80s, which is not that long ago. And so for them, a lot of them had pensions that made it to where they didn't have to think about retirement. Both my parents had pensions. So they didn't have to think about saving for retirement. It just happened. It automatically came out of their paycheck. They didn't have a 401k plan. They were just like, I'm going to put in this 30 plus years and I'm going to be good. But for us, we're in a completely different reality now, where barely anyone has a pension these days. And now we have to learn to educate ourselves on all these other things, on what's a 401k, what's a mutual fund, what's a stock, what's a bond, or what are these expense ratios are mentioned in here. Like, we have all these new terms that we are now having to learn in order to have a stable financial life. And so I think for us, we have the responsibility and also the opportunity to educate ourselves so that now we can pass this on to the next generation after us, because they'll more than likely be in a similar boat as us versus, the baby boomer generation to the millennial generation. There's a bigger divide. So I think there's room for growth. I think we can get to a place where we can, take what our parents gave us and now we know new information and be able to explain stuff a little bit better to the next group.
I absolutely agree with that. And I want to give my mom a little bit more credit. She did teach me not to spend beyond my means. So she deserves a lot of credit for that. I'm sorry, Mama. I don't think you're listening anyway, but just in case.
I know my parents are never listening, so I don't have to worry about it.
I think some of my family members have found out, because some will Google me and all right, let's move on. So because now you're in the business of finance and also giving advice on finances, can you tell me what are some concrete benefits of going to see a financial planner or an analyst?
I think this is always a debate I have in my mind as far as, when do people need to speak to a financial planner? Is it necessary? And I think that there's a lot you can learn on your own. There's a lot you can do to educate yourself, to start saving for retirement, paying down your debt, taking care of your household. Like, there's things you can do on your own and educate yourself without the need of a professional. Because right now we're at a time where there's so much information out and available.
Right.
There's a lot of bad information too that you have to be aware of, but there's also tons and tons of good, positive information out on the internet. But what I will say is that a lot of the information is going to be very general. And if you're young, general information works great, because as complicated as things can be made to seem, the process of paying off debt, saving for retirement, it really is simple and can be simple. But once you start to get into very specific situations where you need advice tailored to you, that's where the advice of a professional really can come into play. So especially if you're older, if you're like on the older side, you're approaching retirement, you need to start looking at, how am I doing? What do I need to change? Do I need to save more? Do I need to, have I saved more than enough? Do I need to start being worried about health insurance in retirement once I've maybe lost my health insurance through my employer? Or how does Medicare work? Or how am I going to incorporate Social Security and factor that into what I'll be able to afford in retirement? When you start to get into very specific things, then that's where it can be beneficial to have a professional. If you're looking into, establishing a will or a trust, what do I need to be looking out for? If I'm getting close to tax season, are there some tricky situations that I might need a professional to help me walk me through? And I think that's where professionals are really important, because these people are trained, they understand the laws, and they can walk you through more complex situations. I think that's definitely where a lot of the value comes in.
You're saying it's more so where you are in life. If you're young, you're talking about like a college age, maybe just got out of undergrad. Maybe you don't need to see anyone at that point. But once you start a family, planning for retirement, that's kind of when you want to see more of a professional.
And I mean, even in those situations, if you have the time, you can watch some YouTube videos, read some books, listen to some podcasts, and get a foundation and understand what you need to do. But there are times where you want someone's advice. I know for me, there's times where it's like, I think I know what I'm doing. I feel confident, but sometimes it does help to have a second set of eyes or someone you trust look over something for you. And I think that's where it comes in with when you have a financial planner, there's different, compensation methods that they work off of. Mm-hmm. There's some that work off of a percentage of how much money that you're giving to them to invest or that they're managing for you. And then there's some people who work off of a flat fee. if you're in a situation where it's like, I want to kind of check in where I'm at. I got a couple of tricky things that are coming up in my life. Like I know I'm going to be having a kid, getting married. I want to plan for my death or for my retirement, whatever, like those big life moments. You can go see a financial planner and ask for like a fee only planner. And that's someone who will just charge you a flat fee. I mean, it will be, a non, insignificant amount of money, be
Right.
like, $200, $300, $400. And they'll give you, maybe an hour or two of their time. And you can go through and say, here, these are things I'm thinking about. What do you think? Am I on track? What do you recommend? And then that way it's like I can get answers when I need it for a reasonable fee versus paying someone to just kind of move my money around and take, maybe 1% of all the money I have, which can be, significant over time when a lot of people don't really need someone to constantly be managing their money. They can do something very simple with their investments and then do it themselves. But it's like those weird, tricky life situations that can get a little complicated, a little messy. I think that's definitely where I see a lot of value in a financial planner.
Gotcha. And if anyone needs any other information, they can always tune into Popcorn Finance on Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, or YouTube. They can always find you there.
I appreciate it. Yeah, more than welcome to come over there.
Okay, so just more about your history. Do you have what I think you coined as the term a debt story?
Yeah, I will not take credit for the debt story title, but I definitely have one. My wife and I, when we got married, we didn't have any money. I think as most people, we got married relatively young. I was 20, I think 25 when we got married, and I was living with a family member. We were renting an apartment together. She was with her family. I spent all the money I had on a ring. And then that was it. So when it came time to propose and get married and plan for the wedding, I was like, we both have $0. I don't know how this is going to work. But then that's when the credit cards came out because we had to have a wedding. And, it's not funny at this point. I mean, it's kind of funny now. Her parents were like, why don't you just have your wedding in our backyard? You can it's big enough. We can have a wedding here. And we were like, no, we can't have a backyard wedding. What are you talking about? We got to have, a real one at a venue. And that was our big mistake. So we didn't spend a crazy amount of money, but we probably spent somewhere around, $15,000 and using credit cards, which we didn't have any money to really pay that back. We bought our furniture for our first place on credit cards. We had some medical bills that popped up, some school expenses. And, next thing we know, we had like $27,000 in credit card debt that had accumulated over our first 2 years of marriage. And it was, it wasn't a good time. It was not a good time at all.
Would you just looking, because I think many people, again, this podcast is for people sort of in that age range, sort of in those life circumstances. I don't know how many 18 to 22-year-olds are listening, but there's definitely some people between the ages of 24 to 40 that are listening. Would you, if you had the opportunity to go back, would you change anything about the decisions you made to spend that money on a wedding or a ring or anything else of that nature?
Oh, 100%, 100%. We would have taken that backyard offer and set up there and maybe spent, $1,000 or something or a couple thousand to have some food and have some people there and, keep it simple. Because looking back on it, yes, was the wedding fun and did we have a good time? Yeah, we did. But it was one day and it was not worth the 2 years of stress while we built up the debt and then the 2.5 years of torment while we were paying it down. Because debt takes a toll on you. And we had $27,000 worth of debt and we were probably bringing home, $45,000 between the two of us in Southern California, which is not a lot of money for how expensive it is to live out here. And so that the torment I put myself through emotionally dealing with the stress of making these payments on this debt, looking back, I would 100% do things differently because it really wasn't worth it.
Yeah. Debt of any kind can definitely be stressful. It's not like there's anything immediate like that's a danger to you. There's no gun to your head. There's no knife to your throat, but it still feels like something that is weighing you down and painful to be dealing with. So you understand how stressful it is to be in debt. How has that influenced like your career?
I will say having debt and paying it off, although it was, stressful, like I thought about it all the time. It was a reason why I made different career changes and did different side hustles just to try to get enough money to pay this down. It shaped my life, but it changed the way I think about money. And I think it makes me more appreciative of not being in debt, for one. It makes me appreciative of the changes now and the things we're able to do now that we don't have debt. And also, I think it made me more understanding. Like, I feel like now I can sympathize with someone who's in that situation because I've been there. I've been through it. I know the pain and the struggle. So it definitely helps because it's a difficult situation. And it's something that I don't think anyone, no one wants to be in that situation. And like you said, it's not like if you have debt, they're going to come take all your stuff right away.
Yeah.
But I think it's the compounding of that stress on your life. The fact that you have this constant bill that's going to be large in a lot of people's cases that you're going to have to think about, to plan for. And it does delay things that you would like to do in your life. It could delay you having kids, buying a house, getting married. There's all these life stages that you're, supposedly, quote unquote, supposed to hit. You're supposed to do these things, and having that burden over your head, it has, I think, a lasting impact and can shape the decisions you get to make and the opportunities you get to have because you're carrying this with you.
Right. And I also think about this when you're in debt. It's like you want to seek out help, but then you might have to pay for the help. You just add on more debt. Sorry, you were about to say something.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you're in a vulnerable state when you have debt because you don't want to be there. You may be even struggling to maintain your lifestyle as you're trying to pay it off. So there's going to be people who are just waiting to take advantage of you. I mean, there's so many credit repair scams, debt consolidation scams. I mean, and all those things, there are legitimate businesses that do those things, but there's a lot of people who are waiting to take whatever money you have left away from you. So I think that's why we're in such a great time now. I was just talking to a friend right before this recording about how, years ago, there weren't a lot of resources. It was just, the people who were on TV and a few books you might find in the bookstore, but it wasn't like as mainstream as it's becoming now. And we're at a point now where I would say if you're struggling with debt and it's not like a extreme situation where it's like, you've defaulted on all your credit cards and your loans and you're dealing with multiple collection agencies and you can't make the minimum payments even if you wanted to. Like, if you're in that type of situation, then yeah, it might be helpful to seek out some professional assistance. Mm-hmm. But there are so many resources now to where you can find people, and I'm not just talking about me, like you can go find all these other podcasts and blogs and YouTube channels where people are in detail sharing their stories of how they were in debt and how they got out of it and some tips that they took away from it. And you can find, there's so much advice out there now to where I think you don't necessarily have to pay for it. But you could if you wanted to, but you don't have to, because there's so much out there now. There's so many available resources that I don't want people to feel pressured. Like if someone's coming to you and say, here, give me a little bit of money, I can get you out of this situation. I would pause. I wouldn't be quick to do that. I would say, consider their offer, but then also see what you can find out there, what resources you can find on your own to help you maybe there is changes you can make. There's things you could do to help put yourself in a better situation.
Yeah, it's always interesting how check cashing places seem to end up in certain neighborhoods offering their services.
I mean, don't get me started on check cashing places, man. That is some of the most predatory.
I mean, we're on a podcast, so you can get started and you can get started and finish if you'd like. Check cashing, because you know why? Because I think my show might be reaching people that are in some of those neighborhoods. So look, if you just want to speak on check cashing in particular, it doesn't have to be in depth, but maybe a few brief reasons as to why that might not be the best option for someone that might be beneficial. Because I do have people that are living in those neighborhoods right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've had family personally impacted by check cashing places, and so this is the problem with them. I think sometimes it kind of sneaks under the radar because they put them in neighborhoods where people are going to need their services. They're in places where they know people don't make a lot of money. They're probably struggling to get by. So there's going to be a situation where they're going to need some money quick that they don't have. So they set up shop in these neighborhoods. And because, you're coming in there with maybe a relatively smaller amount, when they tell you how much they're going to charge you for, a month, for your $300 check, we'll charge you, $30, and and then you can come back in here, give us your check, we'll take our $30 cut, and you'll be good. Like, it doesn't sound like a lot of money,
right?
But percentage wise, that's 10% in 1 month that you're paying someone, which comes out to like 120% over a year, which is ridiculous. And what happens is people end up in these cycles where it's like there's a bigger issue going on that they need help with, and this is just like a very short-term band-aid, quick fix to kind of help them get through this pay period. So they're coming in there, they say, they sign this agreement, we're gonna, you'll give me my money now, and then when I get paid, I'll come back and pay what I owe you, and then take the difference back. What's happening is you get caught in a cycle because you may have a couple of things that pop up, and so now you may have only needed that $300 right now to get you through this 2 weeks, but then you find something else that's coming up, and it's like, well, now after I pay them, I don't have enough money to cover this other thing, so I need to get another advance. I need to do another advance and another advance. You keep doing these payday loans, and they start to build because that interest rate is so high. I mean, I've seen it can even be up to 400% if you convert it to an annual rate that these people are paying. And with an interest rate that high, it doesn't take very much money for things to get out of control and for it to just spiral out where you owe them way more than you could ever pay them back. And at that point, if you hit a point where you can't pay them back and you're still struggling to meet your other needs, the only solution you're stuck in now is just to keep doing it. Like, I just got to keep going to them, getting in advance to keep covering my bills and keep my head above water. And so I'm not a fan at all. I don't know if you could pick that up from my tone there. I'm not a fan at all from these places because they're preying on these people. Like, you would not go to a nice neighborhood and see one of these payday loan places because they don't need it, and they're not going to let that be in their community. And they know where their market is. They know where they're going to make money, and they definitely prey on people who don't understand what they're getting themselves into, and people they know they can get stuck in the cycle.
Yeah, I did notice your reaction when I mentioned it. That's why I kept poking you. I wanted to hear that.
Yeah, I don't know how it's legal that they can keep doing that, but there definitely needs to be some changes.
Okay. All right. So if you could, I think you just gave a little bit of advice there. So is there any other advice? So let's say you have because again, my age range, the people that are listening right now, and maybe people that are listening to this 5 years from now, if you have, say, a new parent, that is, and I guess it doesn't matter how old they are, actually, whether they're newborns, teenagers, or whatever. What advice might you give to a parent trying to secure their child's financial future?
I think that's a huge question. I think a lot of new parents have because they want. I think it's just natural that you want your kids to have a better life than you did.
Yes,
I think everyone wants that for their kids, for their family. And so I think one thing they can do, I would say, I always hate saying, easily, because everything's not easy for everyone. And so I always want to be respectful of that and mindful of that. But one thing that is something small that you can do to start out is just start thinking about their college. Because as we all know, college is a huge expense. I was fortunate enough that my parents were able to pay for my college for me. But when I went to college, it cost $12,000 for 4 years of college. It was a much different situation than it is for a lot of people right now. So one thing you can do is you can open up something like a 529 plan. And that's just a fancy set of numbers to say this is just an account you can open specifically for your child that you can save money for their future. It could be invested for their future education expenses, and you get a tax break on it. Like, they can pull it out tax-free when it comes time for them to go to college. So that's something small you can do to start setting the foundation for your kids. And when they're really little, it's going to be hard to talk to them about money. They're not going to know what you're talking about. They're not going to understand these concepts. But there's little things you can do, like just getting them involved, like letting them make a decision here or there, letting them have a little bit of money and letting them try to save it in, showing them, look what happens if you build this up over time. Like, I have a friend, for his daughters, he sets up like a savings, a retirement, and then like a spending account. And then every I think month he gives them like, $5 or something like that, and then lets them split it up between the two. And then he'll, like, if you put money in your little retirement account, I'll match it for you. I'll give you an extra dollar for every dollar you put in there, like little things like that. And things like that, just to kind of start to get them thinking about it, to understanding that money is a thing, that there's value to it and there's benefits of using it responsibly. Like just little things you can start to drop on them until they get older, where you can start to let them make more and more decisions. Because really, we learn from doing. You learn from doing things. You can read and watch videos all day, but when you actually get your hands dirty and start, spending money and saving it and making financial decisions and making mistakes, that's when you start to learn and grow.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I just learned what I knew what it was, but I didn't know what it was, a 401k and 403b. 32 years old, man. I'm just learning what this stuff is now because I've been medical school and all. I've been focused on other things. And when you say you learn more by doing, that's exactly right. Because rolling over a 401k into another account seemed like a very daunting task to me 2 years ago. Now it's like with a click of a few buttons, maybe a couple phone calls, maybe filling out some paperwork. So this 529, okay, so I think that's a very concrete thing that you've given parents to think about. With a 529, is there like a startup fee? Is there a monthly fee? How does that work? I'm sure it might be different for each bank that they go to, but generally speaking, startup fee, monthly fee, or is there anything like that to be considered?
It can vary depending on the provider. Because there are companies now that will set up specific 529 plans or help you. I just say they help you manage them and they'll let other people contribute to them. Like there's like other programs and companies that are out there that may have other fees associated with them. Okay. But typically the fee is going to be like an investment fee, like similar to what you'd have if you opened up an IRA, which is an individual retirement account, or like a 401k plan. Typically you don't have to pay a fee to open it, but there's some small, either like they call them like an expense ratio, which just means this is the percent of a fee that you're going to pay on the money that you have inside. There'll be fees like that are associated with the investments that you purchase within the plan itself. But typically there's not, in a lot of cases, there's not a monthly maintenance fee, or if there is, it's very minor, or it's associated with the investments that are held within the account itself.
Okay. So assuming someone researches this and figures out exactly how much they would need to pay, monthly or yearly or whatever it may be, I guess the thing that I'm learning now is to not think short term, but to think long term. Whatever it is that you open up, you want to think about it 18 or 20 years from now.
Yeah, you think about what it's going to become. And yes, a lot of times there is a small fee associated with it. Typically, they're just going to pull it out of what money you have in there. And normally, it should be a very small, minor fee. It shouldn't be something that makes you be like, what's going on? If it's something that draws your attention, there's probably something else going on you need to look into. But no, it's a very minor fee. And it's just like, this is the fee that it costs for these investment products to be managed that are held within these accounts. But the purpose of this is to give you more growth than you can get in a savings account. And I think that's one of the things that we have to kind of wrap our heads around that we're not used to, is the idea of thinking of something as investing versus just saving. So you can put money in a savings account. They'll pay you a small interest. If it's one of these big banks, you may be getting like 0.01%. You may see a few pennies every year flow into your account. But they're just basically giving you a fee. They're giving you a payment for letting them take your money and lend it to other people. That's why they're paying you interest. They're making money because the money you put into the bank, they're going to then loan out to people for mortgages and for credit cards. They're taking your money, they're using it. They're getting interest back from these people who are taking out these loans, and they're giving you a very small piece of that back. Here you go. Here's some small change from the money we were making off of your money.
That is very, very important for people to understand. So you're saying that when you give a bank, I don't know, $100, the bank might take, I don't know, 50 of that $100 and give it to someone else and collect interest on the money that they're lending someone else. That's how the bank makes money. And in order to do that, the bank pays the person who put the $100 in a very, very small fee to borrow that money out to other people. Do I have that correct?
Exactly. So if you go out and try to get a mortgage right now, the mortgage interest rate is going to be like 3%, 3 to 4%, somewhere in that ballpark. So you're paying the bank 3 to 4% every year for the benefit of borrowing this money from them. The bank gets that money from somewhere. They're getting it from the people who are putting their money in the bank. And so there are requirements, or there's like federal requirements on how much money they have to keep. So they can't lend out 100% of the money
Right.
they get. There's a portion they have to keep on hand just in case, people need to run and grab their money. But yeah, that's all they're doing. You're getting a small share of their profits. I mean, they make money other ways. I mean, overdraft fees is a $1 billion industry. They're getting tons of money from other fees that they charge. But the you putting your money in there and then lending it out is one of the ways that they make money.
Okay. And an alternative to using that as a savings, putting that $100 in a savings account is potentially putting it into what I think the term you used was investment account. That's an alternative.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Bring me back on track because I went off the rails there.
No.
Yeah,
We're good. I think we're in sync here. We're in sync. You're good.
So yeah, there's changing your mind, your frame of mind, the way you think about it from I can save, and saving is important. Like having your emergency fund where you put aside, 3 to 6 months of your expenses. So just in case you lose your job or have some big expense you weren't expecting pop up, you got that covered. So it's safe. Nothing's going to happen to it. That's important to have that savings account for that. But investing your money, which means when you say investing, that means I'm taking my money, I'm going to put it into one of these investment accounts, whether it's a 401k, an IRA, a 403b, a 457 plan. There's so many numbers and terms, and all those are just referencing IRS codes. So if you go to section 401k of the IRS tax code, that's where you find the rules that govern a 401k plan. The plan is just named after the section of the IRS tax code where the rules exist. But all these are just accounts. And within those accounts, you put money. So you deposit money into these accounts. And then that money, then you can choose where you would like it to go. And you can put it into typically these things called mutual funds, which are just, think of it like a basket of investments. Instead of you going out and buying, I'm going to buy some Tesla, I'm going to buy some Nike, some Microsoft, some Apple, buying all these individual stocks, you can put your money into a mutual fund where they take it and they spread it around. And you benefit from the growth of all the things they hold within this one fund. So typically in these retirement accounts, you're purchasing shares of these funds, pieces of these baskets of investments. And the benefit of that is you're growing, your money's going to grow at a much faster rate than it would in a savings account. Typically, they say the stock market has grown at, I always go super conservative and say like 7% because I like to play it on the safe side, but really it's grown somewhere around 10% annually over the past, I think like 80 years. And so you're not going to get that type of return from putting your money in a savings account. Even in the best of times, you may get a couple of percent back on your money. Wow. But when it's invested, you're benefiting from the company's growth. As the companies do better, they make more money, they make new products, the value of their company starts to grow. And when the value of their company grows, typically the stock price also rises. Sometimes they pay out portions of the money they make and something called a dividend. And all these things come back to you and allow your money to grow at a much faster pace than it could within a savings account. And the benefit of this is, one, your money's going to grow way faster. You're going to be able to hit a much higher target, a much higher number in your account because of all this growth that's occurring. Your money's going to be growing much faster than it could on its own. But also, one thing people don't think about is inflation. Things get more expensive over time. I'm sure if you talk to your parents, my dad did tell me about how he went to the movie theater with, 25 cents and got a ticket and the soda and had some change left over. And now, you're paying $20 for a movie ticket. Things just get more expensive over time. And so your money can become less valuable over time if you don't invest it. Because if you just sat $100 on your desk and just left it there for 20 years, that $100 is going to buy you less 20 years from now than it did before. If you put it in a savings account, it's going to grow. And if you're getting a solid rate, say you're getting 2% back, like back in the, a couple of years ago, you can get 2% in your savings account. Inflation is about 2% every year. So at that point, that $100 is going to keep pace. That $100 was $100 now, it'll be $102 next year. And in theory, things that were $100 will cost $102 in a year from now. So it keeps pace. But then when you invest it and you're getting 7%, that $100 then becomes $107 next year or $110 next year, whereas things only cost $102. So by investing it, you're allowing your money to not only keep pace with inflation, meaning that it's not losing value over time, but also it's growing faster than inflation, meaning that you can accumulate more money than you could just by going to work. Like you're going to work, you're bringing in the money, but it's fixed. You're only going to earn so much money. But you can put your money to work and it can grow and add to the impact and add to the value of your overall retirement just by, sitting in an account and being used to be put into some of these companies.
you may have just blown a few people's minds. Okay, so I can't stress this enough. I only started hearing about the term dividend and mutual funds 2-3 years ago. I think I heard the words, but I never took a look at what the hell they meant. So, well, folks, I implore you, if this is the first time you're hearing about this, and this is just the start of a conversation about finance. This man has a wealth of knowledge that goes much deeper than this. This is just the start of it. Okay, so I would encourage anyone that maybe didn't pick up on everything. He said it very clearly. I heard it myself. It sounded like what I've heard in the past. Go back, re-listen. This is important, very important stuff. And by the way, I found out about inflation, and then I was like, what? Because I also said to myself, why is this can of soda now $1 versus 65 cents? And I learned something then, but then I also realized I'm getting old. So
yeah, exactly. When you notice that things are getting expensive, you're like, oh yeah, I'm old now.
Okay, let's move on. Okay, so if you could go back, because we just asked about what a parent would do for their kid, right? If you could go back, and maybe you've already said it, I don't know, but if you could go back as a teenager and you wanted to do something to set yourself up financially, maybe nothing big, maybe it is something big, I don't know, but what might you do as a teenager with maybe a part-time job or no money at all to maybe set yourself up for financial security or put yourself in a good position financially?
The biggest thing I would say is I wish I would have just opened up an IRA, which is an individual retirement account. I think I mentioned that. It's something that you can open up on your own. Like a 401k, you have to have a job. Your employer has to offer that plan. You can't go and say, I'm going to open up my own 401k. I mean, if you're a small business, there's other things. I won't get into the weeds on that, but you need an employer. There needs to be a business involved in a 401k plan. An IRA, you can go a ton of places. You can go to Fidelity, Vanguard. There's online ones like Betterment. There's a lot of options where you can just open one up. And as long as you're bringing in income, that's the only rule. You can't put money someone gave you. If you don't have a job and someone just gave you some money, you can't put that into an IRA, or it has to be earned income.
Okay.
You have to have worked, they paid you. Now you're putting a portion of that away. And just opening up something as simple as an IRA it'll have a huge impact, because your best friend when it comes to saving for retirement, for investing, is time, because the more time it has to sit, the more it can grow. There's this rule, it's called the rule of 72. And I won't even try to explain the math of why it is true. But the way it works is, if you take the number of years times your interest rate, if it equals 72, the money will double. So what that means is, if you have 10 years, and you're going to get 7.2% interest every year for that 10 years. After 10 years, you take those two, 7.2 times 10 gives you 72. Mm-hmm. That means your money will double over that period of time. So if I put in $100 into this investment account and I got 7.2% return every year, 10 years from now, I'll have $200. And it's going to double every 10 years at that rate.
Wow.
So you can see the benefit of having more time. If you start when you're 18, that means it's going to double at 28, and then at 38, and then at 48, and 58, and 68. You have all these multiple instances of your money doubling and growing and compounding upon itself. Versus if I'm 58 and I just start, by the time I'm 68, I'm going to get my money to double once. So the earlier you can start, the bigger that impact can be, because you can go from 18, it goes from 100 to 200 at 28, then to 400 at 38, and then at 800. And you see the how quickly it starts to escalate. So if I can go back to my younger self something, and for anyone out there who's younger right now is listening to this, just starting, putting something in an IRA, investing it, and just letting it sit there. Don't do anything fancy. Pick there's things called like S&P funds or total stock market funds. There's very simple things. You don't have to be an expert on any of this. Put your money into that, let it sit there, and just let time do its thing.
Oh my goodness. Are people trying to keep this stuff a secret? Is that what? Is this like a secret only? It's like a secret handshake, or like a club people go to? Because I don't. Maybe I did hear about it, but I don't remember paying attention to it at all. maybe I'm trying to keep it a secret from myself when I was younger. I don't know, but thank you so much for bringing that information up. My last question for you. Are you hopeful, looking back at the COVID situation that I brought up, more so in a joking manner, but to be more serious about the situation, are you hopeful for people to be able to recover financially from the COVID situation?
Ooh, I think that's a great question. I think one of the things we saw in this pandemic was it didn't impact everyone the same way. And they call it, so when they were looking at, like, when economists, when they were looking at the economy as a whole, like the economy is like, everything, like the businesses, the workers, like everything that makes up our financial world here. They try to project what type of recovery we're going to have. And they use these different letters to project it. Say if it's like a V-shaped recovery, it means that everything took a hit and then it popped right back up. So it's a V, has that V shape. Or they'll say it has like a U shape, meaning it takes a hit and kind of sits at the bottom and then recovers back up. They just use different letters to represent like the shape it would make on a graph of how the world is doing, how the economy is doing. They're seeing what's called a K-shaped recovery. And I mean, it doesn't really work when you draw it out, but I look at the graph like that's not really a K, but that's what they're calling it.
People can Google it. They can Google the graph. It's okay.
Yeah. Google a K-shaped recovery. And what it means is it took a hit, it dropped, and then some people went back up, some people stayed down.
Oh.
And so what it's saying is, like, when you're looking at people who are already high income earners, people with college degrees, people who worked in these office jobs, they recovered just fine. Most people in these situations had the opportunity to work from home. You could keep working, keep your job, keep your pay, no big deal. You just, had to deal with, with the pandemic.
Yeah.
is what you had. So, but there's so many other people who didn't benefit from that, who their job required them to be there in person. And so they were just stuck being at home. They were laid off, they were unemployed. And for these people, the recovery they're still waiting for their world, their economy to recover. And so there's this huge divide of people who saw no real impact financially or even did better during this past year. And then those who had a significant life-altering impact to their financial world. And some of these jobs, they say, will never come back. Like, some of these jobs are gone and they're just gone permanently. Either the business went under or the business may never replace these positions. And so that's what I've learned during this past year, or over a year now at this point, is that the reality of the pandemic has been different depending on who you are, where you live, what your job was, what opportunities you had. So when I look at, okay, how do I think people will recover? To some people, this was no big deal. Like, other than the fact that they had to deal with the potential of catching a life-threatening disease, if you take that major factor out of this, they saw no change. They don't have to worry about a recovery. They never were hurt. But then the other people, what we're seeing is what they're going to need is these government policies, the extension of unemployment, the extension of the eviction moratoriums, these programs, the student loan deferrals, like, these things are like life-saving for a lot of individuals. And I think some people shy away when they hear, oh, government, we don't want government handouts and all that stuff. But it's like, this is not a handout. Like, we're all contributing to society. We're all paying taxes. We're all making this world work. We're all contributing members. And these people just have been impacted negatively by it. And there may be a time when I may need this assistance. These programs there may be a time where I need to, pull on food assistance and things like that. So you never know what's going to happen to your life that's going to put you in a tough position. And so that's why I never look down on anyone who needs help,
right? Because
you don't know what could happen to you, and you could be in the exact same position.
Right.
So for those people, I think the continuation of these programs, the continued vaccination rate going up, which will allow the economy to reopen. And once the economy can reopen, a lot of these jobs where these people couldn't go back to work unless, people are allowed to gather and congregate again, that's going to be the biggest thing for them. So that's what I see. If we keep trending this way, especially in California, we have such a high vaccination rate, we're seeing positive changes and that's moving towards that direction. But I think what I see is that as we continue to do better as a country, it will benefit all of us, specifically those who have been hurt the most and those who have been stuck in this position where they're just in a hard place. Like really their only option, unless they're going to make a significant career change and just say, you know what, I know several people who took this time to maybe learn something new, learn a new skill, maybe really consider making a career change. But outside of that, if you're like, this is the field I want to be in, and I'm waiting it out, for you, it's just us doing better as a country and us hopefully being able to reopen safely and letting some of these people get back to work.
Yeah, it's very weird hearing it referred to as a handout. I've never heard of more people wanting to go to work.
Yeah, exactly.
They're angry they can't go to work. Just the idea that people just want. I think the small percent. There's definitely people that don't want to go back to work and are okay with just receiving checks. But the percentage of that, I'd imagine, is just so small in comparison to the people that want to earn their paycheck and go to work. It's unreal.
Yeah, it's like, to me, I would never say get rid of a program that helps millions of people because, like, a handful of people are abusing it. And I mean, there's rich people who abuse loopholes, and we're not gonna like say, well, you don't get, we're gonna cut all benefits for corporations because these people are abusing it. Like, it doesn't work that way. It has to go both ways. It's for those who need it the most because they're struggling, and those who are doing well and are working within the the rules that are set forth. The greater good, I think, outweighs any type of downside of a few people taking advantage of a system.
I'm trying to be more optimistic. I'm not all that optimistic about the policies. Just seems to be behind what should have been done, a year ago. But I think where most of my optimism is within people, the fact that we got that vaccine out so quickly, the fact that I think people generally overall now, I'm not talking about that small percentage of people that you see on the news. I think overall people want to help each other. I think people want to get back to work. I think people want to be around each other. And I think with all that, with time and of course effort, of course more vaccinations, we'll find our way back on track. So I'm optimistic in people more than anything, not necessarily laws and government, but people I'm optimistic about. So, well, I did have one question, but I actually think you answered that. That tends to happen sometimes. I was going to ask you how, if COVID had changed any recommendations that you made for people, or that you would make for people, versus like 2 years ago versus 1 year ago.
I would say one big one. I think I've seen this across the board with so many people, is the recommendation on what makes a sufficient emergency fund.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so emergency fund is really just, it's a savings account. You put money in there, and if you have a big emergency, like you lose your job, your car just completely breaks down, you have some major home repairs, some major medical bills, some things are just unexpected that you don't think are going to happen. That's what you use an emergency fund for. And typically the rule has been, put somewhere between 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. So like the mandatory stuff, like you wouldn't put like I spend, $40 a week on going to Starbucks. Like you wouldn't put that in there because that's not necessary. That's just for fun. So it was 3 to 6 months because people were like, typically if you lost your job or if you had a major expense, you would hopefully be able to find another job in the 3 to 6 month range, or whatever expense you had wouldn't exceed that number. But this pandemic it lasted for so long, and the impact was so devastating to so many people that I'm seeing a lot of people revise their recommendations to a year of living expenses. Now that is a lot of money. Right. even if you like don't think you spend that much money, if you take that over a year, that's still a huge number. So it's still a big target for a lot of people. But for me, my recommendation is like, don't be tempted by the news of people. Like I remember when the whole GameStop thing was going on, that was a whole that was a whole thing of people like, well, let me get into this. Let me get some Bitcoin. I'm going to do this. Now they got these NFT things, which people barely understand, which I barely understand. And there's all this temptation to, I'm going to make a lot of money. And I'm going to, if I can just get my timing right, if I can just hop in it real quick, I'm going to make a lot of money. So instead of being safe and putting this in the savings account, I'm going to, let me just throw it over here and see what happens. Because the thought of that reward it outweighs in your mind the risk that you're taking.
Right.
So for me, what I tell people is don't Don't worry about any of this other stuff. You need to secure your house first. You need to secure your foundation. So if something happens to you, you're not going to be in a really, really tough position. So for me, it's your focus right now should be building up an emergency fund. Don't worry about all this other investing stuff. You see, investing is important, but all these other things you're seeing right now are just a distraction. Your main thing should be making sure you have something to fall back on. So working, even if it's I can only get a month worth of my expenses over, the next year, just do that. Start, build a foundation, and it's going to get easier. And then what I find is that for some reason, the more stable you make yourself, the fewer emergencies pop up. I don't know why that happens. When I was at my brokest, that's when I had the most emergencies ever in my life. Things would just happen. But for some reason, that stability, it just kind of I don't know why. It could just be, it really could just be nonsense. And I'm just saying that, but it just feels like it to me, like when I was able to start to build an emergency fund, be more stable, I had less emergencies pop up. And when they did, it didn't stress me out because I knew I had the money there. So that's why I say that should be your focus, building a strong savings account, a strong foundation for yourself.
Okay. And is there like a number for that, or can you just open up any savings account at all? Is there a number, or for somebody to look up, or can they just go to their bank and just say, I'd like to open up a savings account?
I would say, so you may hear this term thrown around of a high yield savings account.
Okay.
So what that means is yield is another word to say like return. And they're just referring to the interest rate. So it's really like a high interest savings account is like another way to say it. Right now, high interest doesn't really mean a whole lot. Like, so if you can get like 0.5%, that's a pretty good interest rate right now.
Okay.
Oftentimes the larger banks, they don't pay those rates. Typically you find this with the online banks. So this would be like an Ally Bank, Marcus. There's several other online banks, and they pay higher rates because they don't have a physical footprint. So like your Chases, your Bank of America, these banks have all these locations, they have all these buildings, they have all these tellers, they have all this staff, and the online banks have none of that. So they're able to take the savings and pay out a higher interest rate. So typically if you go to an online bank, you can get a higher rate. So that's typically what I recommend. Like I'm a fan of Ally. They don't pay me to say that. I've never had a brand deal with them. I've liked them. They're easy to use. They typically pay a pretty high interest rate. Capital One has one. I think it's called Capital One 360. Just if you Nerd Wallet is one of my favorite sites to go to. Again, they don't pay me to say that. I just like the site.
Right.
If you go there and just say top high yield or top high interest rate savings accounts, and they'll have a list that they'll update every year. I think they even update every month, and you can go on there and they'll show you their ratings, their reviews for these banks, and the interest rates they pay. You can just pick one, whichever one you like. And if you pick one and you don't like it, I say close that account and then try another one. Like there's no harm in doing that. But that's where I would keep it, because at least you will get a better interest rate than at your local bank. And a lot of times credit unions are really great. So your credit union might have something good for you there. But also another good thing is putting your savings at another bank just makes it that much harder for you to take the money out. So gotcha. It's like another like a little safety feature to keep you from spending up your savings.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much for stopping by. I really do think you may have with just, again, we're scratching the surface with what you know. I think with just this little bit of information, you may have changed some people's lives 20 years from now. Okay. And even if directly you didn't, I think people will now be able to go and Google search and learn a little bit more for themselves about how they can change their lives financially. So big benefit. Thank you so much. How can people find you if they want to learn more about finance?
Yeah, I think probably one of the easiest ways is if you're on Instagram, Popcorn Finance Podcast, you can find me there. That's probably the social media site where I spend the most time. Or you can just go to popcornfinance.com and you can find me there. You can find the podcast there and say hi. And it'd be great to have you come over if you have a question, or if you just want to check out the show, be more than happy to have you over.
Fantastic. I'm going to put all that information in the description. And thank you so much for stopping by. It's been a pleasure.
It's great talking with you.
Bye-bye.